Am I a hero?
Am I a hero?
We're here to challenge your definition of a hero.
Okay, everyone. Here we are. Welcome to the inaugural episode of the 10,000 Heroes podcast. My name is Nathan Ramos, and with me here is my co-host, Ankur Shah Delight. Hello, sir.
Hello, and good morning.
And good evening and good afternoon. How exciting. How exciting to be here with everyone. What is this? Let me see if I can put it in a nutshell for you. Our goal with this podcast is to shine a spotlight on heroism that's all around us. So I think maybe some of you also can recognize the rise of the popularity of the superhero. We want to uncouple this idea of heroism from the idea of celebrity. This is how we think we can combat the polarity and nonsense and incoherence that has come to flood our social media feeds and our news channels. We want to draw attention to what's actually happening in our lives, things of consequence and significance. So I think it's fair or safe to say that we're here to help people win the fight for significance in their lives. To put the focal point back on them and what they're doing and what type of acts of heroism we might find there. So my hope here, I think our common hope here, is that we find out that we have much more in common than we may have otherwise thought. How'd I do, Uncle? Do you think that's what's going on here?
Yeah, I mean, I would have a totally different take on what our goal is with this podcast.
I imagine you would.
But we'll share that in episode 2, because I love this as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We have plenty of opportunities to get it right. That's always a good thing.
That's right. On today's show, we have Jamal Rahman, and Jamal is an Interfaith Sufi Imam. So let me just check with you. Did you understand any of those words, Nate?
No, but I was eating cereal. I wasn't paying attention. Tell me, what are they again?
Yeah, Interfaith Sufi Imam. So an imam is the kind of the religious professional in Islam.
I see.
Sufi is the mystical branch of Islam.
And what?
Interfaith meaning he rolls around with a rabbi and a pastor. They're called the Interfaith Amigos. And they're there bringing religious wisdom and spiritual wisdom from all the different traditions mixed together in a non-exclusive way, and using it to build community and bring people together.
Wow. Do they call themselves the Interfaith Amigos?
I did not make that up. You can Google it. They call themselves the Interfaith Amigos. They travel all over the world.
I'm sold. I need no other reference than that title. Wow. And how were you at one of these events? Did you meet him in this context?
So I met him
party or what? So
one of the things, you may or may not know this about me, but I marry people. I've celebrated over 30 weddings. And one of the wedding celebrations I did was an Islamic nikah. It was an Islamic commitment ceremony. So I was doing part of it and he was doing the other part of it. And that's how we met. And I fell in love with him. I think I want to be him.
Yeah.
So I think it's a perfect choice for the first episode of this podcast.
Well, I did listen to this already. I snuck a listen, and I agree with you. I was blown away by the simplicity and the directness of this message of, is it trite? It's a message of love, right? It's a message of inclusion and compassion. Yeah, it's beautiful. I agree. I think this is the perfect inaugural episode, and I'm excited for our audience to listen to it.
Yeah, me too. And one thing I really like, and I'll go into this more later, I'm sure, but he's actually giving us not just inspiration and stories, although there's plenty of those, but concrete tools that we can practice and use in our lives. And that's really what I'm looking for too, is is there something I can get out of this that's going to transform my life as a listener if I apply myself? And Jamal, Uncle Jamal, as I call him, he dropped plenty of those.
I agree. I was making notes furiously and took away some good gems. So I guess without further ado, let's hear it.
the idea with this podcast, it's called 10,000 Heroes. And the whole idea is that we want to talk to people who have experienced some kind of insight or transformation in their life, who are, just ordinary people in many senses of the world, but who are also extraordinary people, and just understand a little bit of their stories and see if there's something they can share that could catalyze or trigger a transformation in the people who are listening. Kind of plant a seed. So that's the intention here. So let me.
Well, that makes you a hero, Uncle. Yeah.
Yeah, that's my ultimate, where I want to lead myself and everybody to is being able to see everyone as a hero. And It actually reminds me of the story, and I think it's an Islamic story, of when a beggar or someone in rags comes to your door. There's many reasons to be kind and compassionate and to offer hospitality, but one of the reasons is that person may be the greatest of heroes. Maybe a divinity in disguise. Is that right?
Yeah, that's in several traditions, actually. Yes. So that actually brings me to a question which I think you have been pondering. What constitutes a hero? I mean, there's so many different aspects, but the story you just mentioned is actually a very key point, in that a hero will do a righteous deed. That's mentioned in the Quran again and again. Do righteous deeds, but without attachment to the earthly fruits of that service. The prestige, the money, the power, the fame. If I can just do that righteous deed without that attachment, that in a sense makes me a hero. So you see, for example, you are doing this program, and your main goal is that may this be of service to others. It might make you famous, give you a lot of money, but if your main focus is going to benefit others, that makes you a hero. What makes me a hero in participating? If I'm using my words just to impress you or your audience, that's great. But if I'm using my words in a way that I feel would would serve the common good, that makes me a hero, in my opinion.
I love it. And that was my first question. How do you define a hero? And I love how you answered it without me asking. So I have another question that is just because I know you a little bit, and maybe for the benefit of our audience, because I don't do much in the way of introductions, because I want to just really let the words speak for themselves. But I'll just say that you're an imam. Is that? Yeah. So tell me about the presence of the divine in your life.
Well, the Quran says every soul where you turn is the face of Allah. And the presence of divinity is utterly mysterious. Where is it exactly? Well, it's everywhere, meaning it's outside of me and also inside of me. In fact, there's a wonderful revelation that came to the Prophet Muhammad, where God says to humanity, beloved one, I cannot be contained in the space of the earth. I cannot be contained in the space of the heavens, but I can be contained in the space of the pure, loving heart. So if I am loving, if I'm doing the work of purifying myself, I'm feeling the presence of divinity. If I am serving humanity, doing righteous deeds with God's creation, I am connecting to divinity. So to me, to answer your question very simply, I will feel the presence of divinity if I do the work of becoming a more evolved human being. I will feel the presence of divinity if I'm truly, humbly, sincerely serving God's creation.
Yeah. So I want to go into that a little bit. And this, I'm going to ask you some personal question. You know,
Sure.
some vulnerability is an option
Absolutely.
here. So however you'd like to respond, but my impression, you know, for me is that things really go up and down or in and out on a day-to-day or on a moment-to-moment basis. So for you in the work you're engaged in, do you notice that there are days where you are really engaged in that work and you feel the presence of the divinity more, and then there's other moments, other days where it's less, or is it more constant for you?
Oh, absolutely. You know, it's a world of opposites. In fact, you know, all the traditions say that. Taoism says it, Hinduism, Buddhism, Christianity. In the Quran, there's a verse that says, God says, of everything we have created opposites. So you might know only God is one. Meaning, so in my life, I will experience joy, I'll experience sorrow, I'll experience highs, I'll experience lows. And in those times of difficulties, I might feel that I am becoming separated from divinity, or I'm not experiencing the ecstasy, the joy, the beauty of presence. But that is why all the traditions say that whether you are in a situation where there's joy or sorrow, ups and downs, trials and tribulations, good times and bad times, just be present. Be present. Learn the art of being present, and you will eventually you will find your way into that divinity. Sometimes more easily, sometimes with some difficulty, but keep on track. As Americans say, you know, keep on trucking. Keep at it. So can I be present? That's very important. It's easy for me to say that, but no, in times of difficulties, I'll have doubts, I will bemoan, I will, you know, have different kinds of thoughts, different kinds of behavior. But if I can somehow keep the faith and be present, I will really feel the presence of divinity. And by the way, it doesn't mean that life is going to be easy for me. It doesn't mean that I will experience joy all the time. In fact, there's a very famous story of a Bedouin who was asked, do you believe in God? Do you believe in the presence of divinity? And he answered, you mean the God who sent me afflictions, pain, sorrow, poverty, made me wander from country to country to country. But as he spoke, he entered into a state of ecstasy.
Wow. There it is, the paradox.
Yes, it is a paradox, no doubt.
So there's a word that you used a few seconds ago. You said somehow keep, and you also connected faith and presence, which I really like. But you said somehow keep that presence, somehow keep that faith. I'd love to get into that somehow. You know, how do you do it? How have you noticed people do it? What are techniques that we can practice? How do we demystify the somehow so we can get back to the actual mystical experience?
Yes. Well, you know, faith is something very mysterious, meaning, let me go with the Quran says. Quran says there are several stages of faith. The first stage is hearsay. Someone tells you, there is a God, there is an invisible world, you know, this and that, all those beautiful things are there. But the Quran suggests, if you want to really have faith, move from what is called borrowed certainty, move from borrowed certainty to an inner knowing. So the Quran says the first stage is faith is based on hearsay, what others tell you. But the second stage, that's called Ainul Yaqeen. Ain means eyes, means you explore. You try to find out for yourself. And you might have different voices in you. Is this a voice of God, the voice of my ego? Well, you might make mistakes. Learn from the mistakes, explore, investigate, be present, participate in the bazaar of life, grow and learn from your mistakes. And the third one is called Haqq al-Yaqeen, meaning as you keep doing these and having these experiences, and you keep on aligning your personality to your higher self, then a faith emerges from within, that it feels like it's the truth. and you have trust in it then you have trust. But you see, you've done some work. Like Ramakrishna, the Hindu mystic, he was saying, the grace of God is always there. It's like a wind blowing, but you've got to raise your sail to catch the wind. You've got to do the work to do that. So that's one aspect. You have to do that work. Number two, faith can become very strong, more rooted, more real, if you have what is called an authentic community, a circle of love. And that's a whole different topic. You have people around you, your inner circle, or could be from family and friends who support you, nourish you in good times and bad times. And that builds your faith also in humanity and also in the invisible world.
Sure.
So inner work and having an authentic sangha or community.
I love that. I love that those are together. So I want to go into the first one a little bit. I want to recap it and see if I understood it correctly and put it maybe in terms that I'm more familiar with. So step one for me seemed a lot like intellectual understanding. Right. You read it in a book, someone tells you that you're convinced in an argument by the logic of it. And you're like, oh, okay, I like that idea. That's powerful. And then step two. So this is for me, I had this long journey with meditation. So at some point someone told me, hey, you should meditate. It's going to lead to all these good things. I was convinced. So I began meditating. I meditated for, I don't know, almost a year. I had no good things happen to me. And then I did a 10-day silent meditation retreat. And for me, in your kind of architecture of the stages of faith, that was the second stage for me, where I had this experience where I did this thing, I received this teaching. I had all kinds of experiences. I put in a lot of work. There's a lot of suffering, meditating 16 hours a day in silence and all that. But I had a visceral experience of what was possible and what could happen. Does that correspond to the second stage?
Absolutely. Yes, absolutely.
And then what would the third stage? What's the kind of analogy?
Third stage would be that you keep on doing that work. You keep on aligning your personality, which is nothing more than a bundle of conditioned reactions to life's circumstances. I'm quoting the Buddha. So I love that quotation, that insight. What is your personality? You are your personality. The point here is you are your personality, but you're also your Buddha nature, Christ nature, Allah nature, Elohim nature, Krishna nature, Allah nature. But how do I get to that? Well, it's a work I have to do every minute, every hour, every day, every week, every month, of aligning my personality, which is nothing more than a bundle of conditioned reactions to life circumstances, with my, whatever belief system is, my higher self, my divine spark, my Christ nature. It's constant work, becoming more compassionate, more aware, more forgiving, more loving. So this is constant work, and from that will emerge that the truth of that faith, that trust in something greater than human personality. But I wanted to say one thing. What you are saying, essentially, I would summarize it as saying that true faith or trust is moving, as the Sufis say, Islamic mystics say, moving from a knowledge of the tongue to a knowledge of the heart. And the knowledge of the heart comes through experiences, through evolving. That's one thing. The other thing about doing this inner work is, all the traditions say, and the Quran says it several times, do this work of evolving into the fullness of your being, your meditation work, for example, little by little by little by little. And what happens is, there comes a point, there's a huge quantum jump. Again, it starts little by little by little, then again a quantum jump. My problem is, I want the quantum jump, but not that difficult, little by little by little. Little work. So, you're a classic example of, you did that meditation again and again and again and again, and you achieved a quantum jump. Keep on doing it. There'll be another quantum jump. You'll go deeper and deeper and deeper, but it's work. Let's call it play work. Becomes easier if you have companions, spiritual companions.
Yeah. It's definitely easier when I think of it as play. And it's definitely easier to have it in a group, to have companions.
Yes.
Yeah. So that reminds me too. So I want to get back to the second point, because I think it's just, equally important as the inner work is this external community. But I wanted to learn a little bit more. About your past, did you have a community like that growing up? What were your parents like? What was the environment like where you were raised? And did that have anything to do with who you are today?
Yes, very much so. First of all, I've been extremely blessed. Probably my greatest blessing is that I've had the gracious gift of God that I've had very wonderful parents, very beautiful father and mother, who are very like a hero and heroine, did everything for the children, were very loving parents. So very lucky. Secondly, I've also been very blessed with wonderful friends. And thirdly, my parents were diplomats. So they used to travel from country to country to country. So that also, in a sense, made me realize, and my parents were very liberal, being very liberal Muslims, they encouraged me to visit, even synagogues, churches, mosques in different countries, temples, Hindu temples, Buddhist temples, in the different countries they were posted. So I became very aware of what a real community is. Meaning I've had wonderful friends, wonderful parents. And when I used to visit these houses of worship, I began to realize that in one's life, as one gets older, it is very critical to have, shall I say, spiritual companions, people who can help you evolve into the fullness of your being, who you can consult with whom you can do acts of beautiful service as a project, as a service project together, and also just have fun together. So growing up, I've always had that circle. First, it was parents, then parents died, friends, family and friends. So now I have a small group of family members and friends that constitutes my, what Rumi would call, the 13th century sage, circle of love. And I feel very nourished, supported. I am able to be vulnerable in that circle. And that has become my life work now, Ankur. I mean, to be able to help others create that similar circle, which we need more and more as we grow older and older and older. So we can really become more fulfilled in life.
Yeah, so your life work is kind of spreading and enhancing this gift that your parents gave you through that travel and that openness to all these different worlds.
I've realized that, this is the best way to peace and harmony in the world. Like Thich Nhat Hanh, that wonderful Buddhist monk, said, that, well, create peace is not a great leader or a prophet or an avatar or a great being from those heavenly realms. What will create peace is creating these circles, these communities that are mindful, that are loving, that help one another. It could be based on what is called outer similarities. Same belief, same, I'm Muslim. But then the key is that these circles help you to grow in your raising of your consciousness, doing acts of service, you enjoying life. But the key is also to have these circles interact with one another. That is very critical. See, for example, I'll give you an example. In France, it has always been believed, I'm taking that country as an example, that multiculturalism always enhances society. Diversity enhances society. So you've had different cultural groups in France, and they encourage that. People of different religions, different cultures. However, it has been found that if you just have diversity without creating the environment where they're interacting with one another, if you don't have that possibility or that environment of intercollaboration, interaction, it can actually be a huge obstacle. People become insular. They withdraw into their outer, their similarities. There's resentment. But if you can somehow, like through your podcast, through creative ideas, different groups interacting, intercollaborating, joining hands in projects of social justice, planetary degradation, joining hands together, doing that work of service, that is going to create peace in this world. Those grassroots circles that we can create.
That's beautiful. So it's not just the diversity. It's like it's the opportunity for people to really enmesh in each other's lives.
Absolutely. Yes.
Outside of these external similarities that we kind of naturally seek.
You see, Ankur, this is the biggest problem we have in the country, in the US today, that those circles have become insular. They're not interacting. So they're becoming tribal. They're becoming, should I say, selfish. It doesn't matter what the circles are. And the more insular they become, the more they refuse to interact, the more polarized the society is becoming. But if you can create opportunities where no matter how different you are, you connect, and here's a key point, on a human level. You don't have to start talking about religious differences, political differences, but just connect on a human level. Then what happens is, when you connect on a human level, it becomes very difficult to demonize or dehumanize the other. Differences might remain, but now they no longer loom as a threat, number one. And number two, when there is a personal interaction, it creates the space to join hands, to work together, collaborate, cooperate in projects of mutual interest. But that human connection, that interaction is very critical. We call it sharing 3 cups of tea. And I can explain more if you like, but that interaction, that human interaction, just sharing our common humanity, our joys and sorrows, is the first step and probably the most important step.
So many of us might approach a new relationship or even decide to speak to someone or not to speak to someone based on a perception of a common interest. Like, oh, I like this t-shirt has the same political slogan that I like, or whatever it is. But you're saying if we focus on the common humanity, we will discover a common interest that may not have been immediately perceived.
Very well said. Very well said. And also, it'll dissolve or diminish our stereotyping of the other, which increases the more they are isolated. It becomes not only magnified, it becomes monstrous in the stereotyping and the volume of the stereotyping, only because there is no human connection.
Oh yeah, I mean, I'm definitely guilty of that myself.
We all are.
So much, yeah. So can you give me? I mean, I know you work with lots of people of lots of different faiths. Can you give me like a really inspiring, positive, heartwarming example of something you've seen in the last couple of years that demonstrates this?
Well, for example, after 9/11, when there was so much of animosity and misunderstanding about Muslims, I had heard of 2 young people, evangelical, very conservative Christians who were, shall I say, allergic to Islam for their own reasons. So knowing that the key is to get to know the other, so I made it my agenda, my mission, to really sincerely, humbly, but persistently come to know the other, sharing our common joys, our sorrows, our humanity. Of course, they were very suspicious, naturally. So this work requires a lot of humility, sincerity, persistence, patience. And my only agenda was to serve the common good. I didn't have a secret agenda of like converting them or trying to influence them. I really just wanted to connect on a human level because I knew that was the key. So it took over a year to connect with them, for them to overcome their suspicion. And then I'm happy to say after a year, they have lost their allergy about Islam, but that's not the real story. The real story is that when I began to connect, somehow was able to create the environment where there was less suspicion, more vulnerability. I really got to know them on a human level. I began to realize I had such conditioned stereotyping of them. Because as I got to know them, their families, their communities, I realized there was such a huge range of difference in what I would consider conservative, fundamentalist, evangelical Christians. And I also realized there is such sweetness in their community and such a dedication to serve the marginalized, the poor, the one who are distraught. So the real story is that I got transformed in this process, which is why I tell everybody, please, especially those you consider adversarial, share 3 cups of tea with them. And by the way, let me tell you what, if I may,
Please,
tell you what the
please.
3 cups of tea are. It's a Central Asian idiom based on a verse in the Quran that God has created diversity for one reason, that you might get to know them on a human level. I'm not saying Muslims observe that. I'm not saying non-Muslims observe that. So what are the 3 cups of tea? Could be anybody, a homeless person I don't want to look at. Could be someone who's against my religion, or someone I have a negative condition bias about. So the first one is, the first cup of tea is listen. The second cup of tea is respect. The third cup of tea is connect. So this is a very critical learning for all of us. Jamal, when you're talking to someone who you consider an adversary, are you really listening? Or are you, as that person is speaking, already formulating your answer? And it's usually the latter, you see. So what is listening? I love the insight of Rumi, the 13th century sage. He says, metaphorically, listening is like putting your head on the person's chest and just sinking into the answer. That's real listening. You know, there's wonderful insight. Who is an enemy? An enemy is someone whose story I have not really listened to. And then Noam Chomsky, I love, from MIT, he said, you know, Jamal, if you don't want to listen to someone because you despise their policies, their behavior, their agenda, whatever their ideology is, if you don't want to listen to someone you despise, you don't really believe in freedom of speech. That's just something you say. So that's number 1, listen. Number 2, very critical, is respect. I might not like the other person, but can I make a differentiation between the person's behavior and their being? Their behavior might be unacceptable. I'm against their behavior, but their being is sacred. Is Christ nature, Buddha nature, Elohim nature? Is that humanity? You know, there's a wonderful 15th, 16th century sage from India, Kabir, Hindu and Muslim. He says, you know, in dealing with an adversary, protect yourself. Don't allow yourself to be abused. Take the right action. But as you take the right action, I beg you, do not keep this person's essence out of your heart. Make a differentiation between behavior and being, essence, as you take the right action. And if you keep this differentiation in your mind and heart, it has the power to shift heaven and earth. So take the action that is necessary, but with what energy are you doing that? Are you making a differentiation between behavior and being? I'm against that person's behavior, not that person's being. So that was number 2, respect. Third one was connect, something we've been talking about. Share human stories. There's a wonderful saying, this universe is made out of stories, not atoms. So if you share stories, then you'll find that conditioned bias begins to melt, no matter how polarized that person's ideology or belief system is. That human connection, it makes that chasm, that difference, no longer loom as a threat. And as I mentioned earlier, we have found always, it creates that space where you can find areas of commonality as service projects you can work on. I'm sorry I gave you a very long answer to a short question.
No, it's perfect. It's really just perfect. And in the beginning, you know, I was thinking very literally. So I was imagining having this this ceremony with these 3 cups of tea with the person.
Yes. No, it's metaphorical.
Yeah. And so when you're interacting with someone, it's almost like a little mental checklist.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Jamal, are you listening? Really listening? Number 2, are you listening with respect? And Jamal, can you somehow create the environment where you can connect on a human level? And it's simple, but not easy. It requires humility, requires persistence, requires patience, but it's very doable.
Wow. So my goal for this, for this podcast is that each episode could really hold a seed that could change our listeners' lives, that could change people's lives if they really chose to engage with it. And I feel like you've given us at least 2. One is the practice of presence, to embrace divinity and awaken divinity, and the other, which is perhaps at the root level very similar, is this practice of the 3 cups of tea, of listening, respecting, and connecting.
Right.
And if I could maybe extrapolate, tell me if this is correct, to see each encounter with our own disbeliefs or our own prejudices as an opportunity for growth.
Absolutely. Well said. And also learning from our mistakes. So I would say a very key point in all of this is, can I do what is called the inner inconvenient work? And what is that? And this is in every tradition, by the way, that the general word is, can you become more Christ-like, Buddha-like? Or let me use a secular word. Can you become a more developed, mature human being? But what does that mean? What do you have to do? Well, from a mystical Islamic perspective, we have to transform our ego. We need the ego to survive. It's a whole different topic, huge topic, different stages of the ego. But essentially, it's about transforming our ego, that I, me, transforming the ego from a commanding master into a personal assistant. And that requires the practice of continuous, compassionate, the key is compassionate self-witnessing, shining the light of awareness on myself, observing myself at all times. So that's one part of the work, transforming the ego, lifelong work. The other work is opening up the heart. That has many meanings, many practices, but essentially, I'll just give you 2. One is to really purify myself. In Islamic mysticism, it's polishing the heart, becoming more compassionate, more aware, more kind, more forgiving, removing the rust from my heart. Again, not easy work. Rumi says, well, Jamal, if you get irritated by every rub, how will the mirror of your heart ever be polished? It's difficult, more patient, more loving, more kind, etc., etc. Constant work, purifying. And in Islamic mysticism, it's like, what can you bring to God? The only thing you can bring, everything you have is from God, from divinity. The only thing you can bring to God is a polished heart, so that the face of Allah is reflected in it. That's the only gift you can bring to God. So polishing the heart, which is the symbol of Sufism, the heart. And if you've seen the whirling dervishes, that's the spiritual movement in the tradition of Rumi, they'll go like, they'll touch their heart, polishing their heart. So that's one way to open up the heart. But the other way, and I'm getting into mysticism, is to embrace not only my 10,000 joys of life, but also my 10,000 sorrows of life. This is a key point in the work of spirituality. Can I have the grace and courage to embrace not only my 10,000 joys, also my 10,000 sorrows? I will quote Carl Jung, the famous Western psychologist, who says, Jamal, will you once in your life have the courage and the grace to kiss the demons and dragons within you? That is how they turn into a prince or princess. It's not that you run towards pain and suffering. Just don't run away from them. when they occur in your life. There's a wonderful prayer of Prophet Muhammad in times of affliction, difficulties, sorrows. He would say, oh God, please save me from its harm, but do not deprive me of its good. So this work, and this is a whole seminar, the practice of how do you embrace joys and sorrows. But you see, the heart will break. Therefore, Rumi has this wonderful poetry. It's okay, Brother Jamal, it's okay. Take a pickaxe and break open your stony heart. The heart's matrix is glutted with rubies. Springs of laughter are in your chest, are present in your chest. Rumi says, divine heart is in human heart. Allah is outside of you and inside of you. So Rumi says, open the window of your heart. The moon will kiss you only through the window. That's one way of opening the window, of embracing our joys, which is very critical. Embrace our joys, be grateful, but also embrace our sorrows. They're just energies begging, just energies which have been separated from us. Our pain, our affliction, our sorrows are just energies that are begging to be acknowledged, begging to be touched, begging to be kissed, and begging to be integrated. So for example, to be practical, if I embrace my anger, my terrible anger, righteous anger, if I embrace my anger, and there are a lot of methods of doing that, my anger becomes transformed into what you might call greater enthusiasm. If I embrace my fear, I acknowledge it, I kiss it, I heal it, I integrate it. If I do all that with my fear, it turns into greater mindfulness. My sadness becomes transformed into empathy. So this work is critical. If we don't do this inner work, in fighting injustice, I might myself become unjust. In fighting extremism, I might myself become extreme if I don't do this inner work.
Wow. Okay. Thank you. And I need so much more. So when you're talking about embracing anger, embracing fear, embracing sadness, can we choose one of those and really kind of drill down and just give me a step-by-step tutorial of what does it mean to let's maybe anger. What does it mean?
Let's take anger. Yeah. In Islamic mysticism, this is the process called sacred holding. So let's say I became very angry. Let's say I experienced road rage.
Oh yeah, great.
Yeah, I experienced road rage. Well, Jamal, the teachers will say, please restrain yourself. Don't do something you will regret, like, hitting that person, being, doing something violent. But at the earliest opportunity, just sit down, close your eyes if possible, and ask yourself, may I connect to this energy that I have been feeling, this anger? It's just begging my attention. It's nothing but energy. It is sacred. So the first step is, Jamal, for the purposes of healing and empowerment, give yourself permission, number one, to feel that feeling.
Okay, so that's very important because, I think many of us, and myself included, I would want to either suppress it or judge myself for it.
Yes, absolutely. No, I am a human being. It's a world of opposites. It's just my personality that is feeling it. It's not my divine spark that is feeling it. And I need to process this. It is a powerful energy, anger.
And there's a message in there for you.
Absolutely. Yeah. Very well said. So number one is feel that feeling as much as you can without overdoing it. But number two is very critical. Jamal, where in your body are you feeling this? Because how do I know I'm angry? It's because I'm feeling a physical sensation in one part of my body. It's not just in Islam. Buddhists talk a lot about it. They call it physical holding. Can you be mindful and locate the physical sensation where you feel this that you call anger. I might say, I don't know, it's all over. No, Jamal. Is it more above your navel, below your navel, on the right side, on the left side? Where do you feel it more? Locate it. That's number 2. So let's say I located it. Let's say it's, underneath my heart, on my left rib cage, or wherever it is in the body. Number 3, very critical again, is, Brother Jamal, as you have, all with compassion, once you've located it, just be present with it. Embrace it, hold it, envelop it as you would hold a loved one, because it is begging to be kissed. It is begging to be acknowledged. It is begging to be held. There is no need to analyze it. No need to rationalize it. No need to fix it, but a great need to be present with it. That's all it's asking of you. Be with me, acknowledge me. So wherever I'm feeling it, just be with it with compassion, holding it lovingly as it holds a loved one, like you'd hold your daughter. Just be with it. If it moves, move with it, and just stay with it. And that's by itself is very healing. Then, after you have done enough of that, you can ask it some questions, like you were saying, very, very wisely you were saying. One question is, do you have a message for me? I'm really willing to listen. Is there a secret you want to share with me? I really am willing to listen. It's not that you're expecting an answer, but you have respectfully, honorably asked that question. It's once you respect. An answer might come later on, but just ask that question. I do it quite very often. Do you have a message for me? And I mean it. Do you have a secret you want to share? Sometimes I get an insight, but that's not important. What is important is I ask with respect, with honor, with sincerity, and just listen. Then the next question you might ask is, how may I love you? It's begging to be loved. Or how may I befriend you? Again, just be with it. Just be with it. How may I love you? And sometimes it gets very emotional, but just be with it for as long as you want. And the last step is, wherever you find that physical holding, just intend to breathe in and out. Feel the divine breath going in and out to that part of you. And that integrates it. But this is a whole class we teach. You see, it's called Sacred Holding. I'll be happy to send you, I have the steps. I have several videos, short videos on it. If you want to, I'll send it to you if you want that. But Ankur, a lot of people have told me over the decades, this has transformed their life. Just doing sacred holding with difficult feelings, as also with happy feelings. We sometimes ignore our happy feelings. I mean, they are equally important. Just being grateful for the happy feelings. But to honor, to acknowledge, honor, kiss, and integrate the difficult feeling in the mystical traditions is critical. That is how I become a more complete human being. See, Carl Jung again, he would say, Jamal, you don't become enlightened just by embracing the light or moving into the light. You become enlightened also by embracing your darkness and moving into your darkness. That is how I become more mature. That is why all the mystics say these difficult situations, they are opportunities. But you have to experience it. It's cruel to tell somebody else when they're suffering, it's an opportunity. That's patronizing, you see. At that time, just give support. You don't have to say wise things. But that's why the mystics say, don't run towards these difficult feelings. Just don't run away from it.
Wow. And I see a lot of similarity between the practice. You call it compassionate holding?
Yeah, compassionate sacred holding.
Sacred holding. I see a lot of similarity between that and what you said about the 3 cups of tea. It's almost like a similar practice reflected inward.
Yes,
you would listen,
and to be present with.
Yeah, you'd be present.
Yes.
Yeah. And so that brings up for me, that's the relationship with the present. There's an emotion that comes up. How do we address it? What about the past? I notice in my own relationship and the people I work with, there can often be a lot of blame about events in the past, self-blame, regret for things that happened many years ago, but are still very present in our minds now. What is the role of the past in your own kind of journey? How have you used the past to help you evolve and not hold yourself back?
So maybe I can start with, what does it mean to be in the present moment? Because, this is a very popular topic in America, in the West. Be present, be in the now, be in the now. So essentially it means that don't be fragmented by a regret of the past or an anxiety about the future. Be in the present moment. But you see, there's some misunderstanding. It doesn't mean that you cannot go into the past. We have to go in the past to learn from our mistakes. We cannot avoid going into the future, even though it has not happened, because we have to plan for the future. What it means is, when you go in the past, be present as you go in the past. When you go in the future, be present as you go into the future. Our problem is that if I'm thinking about a problem, I'm unconsciously, that's the word, unconsciously flitting from the past and future. Oh my God, this happened, this is terrible. Oh, this might happen, this is terrible. It's unconscious, and I flit back and forth unconsciously, and that can completely drain me. The answer could be as simple as, and I do it all the time, let's say if I'm worrying about something in the future, I will say, Brother Jamal, I'm always very compassionate with myself. I'm noticing that you're worrying a lot about this situation in the future. I tell you what, I'll give you 20 minutes. In these 20 minutes, worry as much as you want to about the future. So I use the time to worry about this scenario, that scenario. 20 minutes over, I come back in the present moment. What was the difference between conscious and unconscious? I gave myself permission. I allowed myself. I consciously talked to myself and said, Brother Jamal, I give you permission to worry about this future or about this past situation. Now that we have done that, come back into the present moment. Because the present moment is the only moment that is real. In mystical terms, it's the only moment through which divine blessings can flow. So I have to be in the now. So let me tell you a very common story about the beauty, the majesty of being in the present moment. Let me take the Buddhist perspective. There's a monk who says, I have a toothache. So Ankur, I don't know if you ever had a toothache, but I've had toothaches twice, or maybe 2 or 3 times. It feels terrible, you see? Yeah. And the monk says, if only this toothache went away, I'd be so happy. If only this toothache went away, I'd be so happy. But he turns to the monks who are unhappy, says, do you have a toothache? Do you have a toothache? Do you have a toothache? Why aren't you happy? It's because you don't realize this very moment is a non-toothache moment. That's being really present, you see? Why is it that we don't appreciate the present moment until something terrible happens? Or I don't appreciate something I have unless I'm in danger of losing it. I'm not present with it. So the art of being present, being in the moment, and to be grateful for what is right now, and just to be there, is very critical in every tradition. But it doesn't mean you can't go in the past. Do it consciously or in the future.
Beautiful. So maybe one question, again, I want to use this opportunity to learn a little bit more about you and your development, and kind of, I guess we talked about it a little bit before, this process of learning these 3 stages of faith. So these insights that you're sharing, that you've clearly lived, they're not theoretical. At what point in your journey did it become your your focus or your, obsession to grow in this way? You've told us a little bit about your childhood and how you were exposed to so many different perspectives, but at what point did you get off the train of just, going to an engineering school and making a lot of money?
You mean, how did I get into this work of doing what I'm doing? Is that what you mean?
Yeah. I mean, it's more specifically this work about being present to all of your feelings, or the work about connection, in addition to the work with the community.
Yeah. Well, first of all, how do I know that I am becoming more matured? By being present, by transforming my ego, opening up my heart. It's a question that is a very good question. So how do I know that it's working for me?
Right. Yeah.
And so, there are many, I love teaching stories. So the teaching story is that of a very wealthy person who goes to the mullah and says, "Mullah," this is a medieval village story. "For the last 1 month, this light from the heavens is shining on me. I can feel this radiant celestial light shining on me. Every day, every night is shining on me. Am I becoming enlightened? And it's happening all the time." And the mullah says, "How many goats do you have?" He says, "Mullah, I'm talking about this radiant celestial light which is shining on me, the 24 hours. He says, "How many servants do you have?" He says, "I'm talking about this divine light. You're talking about goats and servants." So the mullah said, it's like this: if now you have become more tender in your caring for the goats, if you become more compassionate with your servants, then yes, the light is shining on you. Otherwise, it's just a projection of your ego. So I can do a self-audit. Am I becoming more tender, more compassionate? Am I becoming more peaceful? Am I developing what the Buddhists would call greater equanimity? Muslims would call sakina, an inner peace, feeling more surrendered to God. Then yes, it is working. Otherwise, it's a projection of my ego. So that self-audit is very critical. The other part about how did I start this work, because of my background, I was very interested in community. And there came a point where I said, I love this work of sharing ideas about building community, sharing ideas about the training I've had in transforming ego, opening up the heart through my parents, through my teachers. I just want to make this a livelihood. But of course, it's a road less traveled. In our culture, you either become a doctor or engineer or this and that. So I took the risk after my parents tragically passed away in 1990. When they passed away, tragically they passed away around the same time. That's when I moved from a knowledge of the tongue to a knowledge of the heart. I realized I really want to follow my passion. How do I do it? But by this time I had some faith, I'd done some inner work, and something told me, start teaching classes in your house. Another voice said, charge each person $450, I remember. And I said, I'd be lucky if all together they pay me $450. Charge each one $450? Yes. Amazingly, I announced this class. I knew very few people here. 8 people came. Each one paid $450. And that was the beginning of classes on self-development. And the community, I realized when this class finished, they wanted another class. But I had another class come to the first level class. And I realized this is the community I'm looking for. Ministry. It is paying my rent. It is fulfilling me like nothing else ever has. I'm doing the work I really wanted to do, sharing these insights, practicing these modalities I have learned, and then having this wonderful circle. And then I realized it has to satisfy not only me, each one of them. So I said, what is your need? Your need, your need. Some people just wanted a little bit more money. Some wanted to do a workshop, but they were shy about people not coming. We said, we will do the marketing. We helped one another. That created the community. And then to cut a long story short, this place you see here, well, you're seeing it. We were led to this place, and this place was given to us for free. I mean, that's another long story. That's why I have faith. I have trust in the invisible world. And so now, since 1998, 1999, we have been here and we own this building now without putting a single penny.
Wow.
So our knees are very scraped with gratitude.
Magnificent. And
So
kind of
it's a
as
beautiful
all,
story.
I love it. I love it. And as always, thank you for answering the question, but the answers you gave that I did not ask the question to were even better, were even more what I hungered for. So I'm going to follow up on that. You talked about you talked about the self-audit, and my eyes just lit up. Like, can you go into a little bit, if for me and for the people listening, how can we perform such a self-audit?
I learned this from another perspective, and I'm veering off the question you're asking me, that, every religious institution, we are finding out, over time gets corrupted. Whether it's Hinduism, Buddhism, Islam, whatever, religious institutions, they over time tend to focus more on recruitment, numbers, and fundraising. And they give less and less and less importance to the spiritual message. And why is that? Because there is no self-auditing of this religious institution. And it has become like a brand name that's competitive. But the real work, that spiritual message of compassion, love, oneness, that is being lost more and more. Tagore, a wonderful poet from India, he says, while God waits for his or her temple to be made out of love, while God waits for his or her temple to be made out of love, man brings stones. So because there isn't any self-witnessing, self-auditing. So for myself, I continuously ask myself in this work that I'm doing, two questions. One is, how do I treat those who can offer me no material advantage? How do I treat those people? The homeless person in the street, someone who can offer me no material advantage. Number two, how do I treat those over whom I have power? For me, those are two very important questions I continuously ask myself. And that gives me an answer to how much progress I'm making in my inner work. Besides the many other questions I ask, these are two major questions I ask. Besides, am I becoming more compassionate, more loving, more forgiving, more patient? And I base this all on something which all the traditions say we need to do continuously: compassionate self-witnessing. I observe myself continuously, and I make adjustments along the way. And I aspire, I don't always succeed, to learn from my mistakes where I go astray. And I'm always very, very gentle and compassionate with myself. But the work goes on every single moment. Compassionate self-witnessing and doing this work, which I think Rumi summarizes by saying, this is the real work, minute by minute, day by day, year by year. Marry your soul. That wedding is the way. Marry your soul. That wedding is the way. Something we talked about. Jamal, align your personality. Conform your personality to come closer and closer to your higher self. And I repeat, what is my personality? So I don't get worried about it. Wow, I was jealous. I got angry. It's okay, Brother Jamal, it's okay. As long as you don't harm anybody, it's okay. That's just your conditioned bias. It's a bundle of conditioned reactions to life's circumstances. That's your personality. But that can change with your work, with your awareness, higher awareness, and bring it closer and closer and closer and closer to your divine spark. So that's my self-audit.
I think that's just an incredibly rare and powerful, just transformative message, certainly for me, but for many of us. The compassionate self-witnessing, as much as I want that to be true, that's just not how my that is not the, I mean, I hesitate to use the word instinctual, maybe the learned. That's not the learned response of my mind. When I make a mistake, the initial inner talk is not compassionate self-witnessing.
Yes.
It's blame.
I think, yes, you hit the nail on the head, if I may say so, with the word compassion. Certainly in Sufism, which is a mystical aspect of Islam, if you ask a Sufi, what is the one divine quality which is most critical to cultivate? And I think that they would all say compassion, mercy, gentleness, especially for yourself. So in fact, Prophet Muhammad said that the entire wisdom of Islam is in the Quran. The entire wisdom of the Quran is in the first chapter, that's called Surah Fatiha. The entire wisdom of the Surah Fatiha is in the invocation, which opens each of the, nearly all of the 114 chapters of the Quran. And what is that invocation? Bismillahir-Rahmanir-Rahim. In the name of God, who is boundlessly compassionate, infinitely merciful. So a Bedouin once asked the Prophet, what is the secret to this? What is the secret to life? And Prophet Muhammad said, it is this, simply this: be compassionate with yourself and be compassionate with others. The key is gentleness, compassion, mercy for oneself. So I just want to say a few more words. It's critical. Sufi teachers will really want to explain the beauty, the majesty, the power of this divine attribute, compassion. Not just in Islam, all traditions have it. So how do you explain that? So all traditions use the metaphor of water in nature. There is nothing as soft and yielding as water is. Yet, for overcoming the hardest, there's nothing as powerful as water is. It can wash away continents, meaning a person who is gentle, merciful, compassionate is possessed of raw, authentic strength. And one more point, wherever water falls, life flourishes. Meaning, compassion is also life-affirming, life-bestowing. So the person who is gentle, compassionate, merciful with self and others is possessed of raw, authentic strength and is also life-affirming and life-bestowing. So in the mystical tradition, do everything with mercy, with gentleness, with compassion. It does not mean that you avoid or deny doing that which is critical. The question is, whatever needs to be done, with what energy are you doing it? If it's done with compassion, it is powerful and it is life-bestowing. So I remind myself of that all the time. That is why I talk to myself a lot. I call myself Brother Jamal. That evokes compassion within me for myself.
Thank you. Thank you, Brother Jamal.
Thank you so much, Brother Ankur. Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks so much for listening, everybody. That's the end of the show. And I mean, I have to acknowledge that was our first episode, our inaugural episode.
That far out, huh?
Yeah.
You're a podcaster now.
I'm a podcaster now. I have a new identity.
How does that feel?
Well, I don't have a hat yet, but once I get the hat, it's going to feel great. Yeah.
That's right. That's right. Yeah. And okay, I'm going to just to be seriously, genuinely, that I think that interview, Uncle Jamal, and I'm co-opting him as my uncle. I hope that's okay with you.
Take him on.
I'm adopting.
This is not a zero-sum game of uncles.
I'm so glad to hear that. I thought that this was absolutely the perfect interview to sort of direct the path of this project, this podcast. It was, his message is so clear, it's so direct, and really, at least with me, I hope with our audience, resonated very deeply.
Okay, be sure to check out the show notes for more resources and information on Jamal's work, and we're excited to bring you more episodes.